November 20th, 1945, Nuremberg, Germany. A woman stood in the witness box, her hand trembling as she raised it to take the oath. Across the courtroom, separated by armed guards and 60 feet of polished wood, sat the man who had saved her life. She looked directly at him. He did not look away. Then she began to speak. Every word she uttered would send him to the gallows. This is the story of Captain Klaus Hartmann and Dr. Sarah Rosenfeld. He was a Wehrmacht officer stationed at Ravensbrück concentration camp. She was a Jewish physician who should have died in the gas chambers within 72 hours of arrival. Instead, she survived 847 days. He made that survival possible. And when the war ended, she made sure he would never survive the peace. Before we understand how love became betrayal, you need to know who these people were before the war made them into what they became. Klaus Hartmann was born in Munich in 1912. His father taught philosophy at the university. His mother played violin in the city orchestra. They were not Nazis. They were not political at all. They were educated, cultured people who believed that civilization would always triumph over barbarism. They were wrong about that. But they raised their son to believe in honor, in duty, in treating all people with fundamental human dignity. These values would save Klaus's life for 847 days. Then they would condemn him to death. Klaus studied medicine at Heidelberg University. He wanted to be a surgeon. He was talented. His professors said he had the steadiest hands they had ever seen. In 1934, he completed his medical degree. In 1936, he was conscripted into the Wehrmacht Medical Corps. He had no choice. All young German men served. He told himself he would serve with honor. He told himself he could maintain his humanity, even in uniform. He believed this until the day he received his posting to Ravensbrück. Sarah Rosenfeld was born in Vienna in 1918. Her father was a physician. Her mother was a mathematics professor. She grew up in an apartment filled with books and music and discussions about science and philosophy. She was brilliant. At 16, she enrolled in medical school at the University of Vienna. At 21, she earned her medical degree, one of the youngest physicians in Austria. She specialized in pediatrics. She loved children. She wanted to spend her life healing them. Then the Anschluss happened. Germany annexed Austria. The Nuremberg laws came to Vienna. Jews could no longer practice medicine. Jews could no longer teach. Jews could no longer exist in public life. Sarah's parents told her to leave, go to Switzerland, go to America. Save yourself. She refused. She would not abandon her parents. That decision would cost her everything except her life. November 1942. The Gestapo came. They arrested Sarah and her parents. They were transported to Ravensbrück, the women's concentration camp 70 miles north of Berlin. Her mother died within 2 weeks, typhus. Sarah's father had already been separated from them, sent to Sachsenhausen. She would never see him again. Sarah was 24 years old. She weighed 98 pounds. She had been assigned to the camp's medical experimentation block. She had perhaps 3 days before Dr. Gebhardt would begin using her in his surgical experiments. Most subjects died. Those who survived were executed anyway, to prevent them from testifying about what had been done to them. She was going to die. She knew this. Everyone knew this. Then Captain Klaus Hartmann arrived at Ravensbrück for his first day of duty, December 3rd, 1942. Klaus walked through Ravensbrück's gates wearing the grey-green uniform of a Wehrmacht medical officer. He was 30 years old. He had never been inside a concentration camp. Nothing in his medical training had prepared him for what he saw. The smell hit him first. Human waste, disease, death. Then he saw the prisoners. Women who weighed perhaps 80 pounds. Women with open sores and broken bones and eyes that had stopped seeing. Women who were dying because no one cared if they lived. Klaus reported to the camp medical facility. He met Dr. Karl Gebhardt, the SS physician who oversaw medical operations at Ravensbrück. Gebhardt explained Klaus's duties. He would provide basic medical care to prisoners who were still capable of work. He would not waste resources on those who could not work. He would assist with medical experiments when required. He would follow orders. Klaus said nothing. He had learned in medical school that you do not argue with senior physicians. You observe. You learn. Then you decide what kind of doctor you will be. That afternoon, Klaus conducted his first medical inspection of the barracks. He moved through the crowded bunks, examining women who had diseases he had only read about in textbooks: tuberculosis, typhus, starvation, edema. He made notes. He documented cases. He tried to maintain clinical detachment. Then he reached Sarah's bunk. She was sitting on the edge of the wooden platform, staring at nothing. She wore the striped prisoner uniform. A yellow Star of David was sewn on the chest. Her head had been shaved. Her face was gaunt, but when Klaus approached and asked her name, she looked up at him with eyes that were still intelligent, still defiant, still human. "Dr. Sarah Rosenfeld," she said in German. "Vienna. Medical degree from the University of Vienna, 1939. Specialty in pediatrics. Currently awaiting assignment to medical experimentation. I estimate I have 48 to 72 hours before Dr. Gebhardt requires a subject for his sulfanilamide infection studies." Klaus stopped. He looked at her medical file. Jewish, physician, scheduled for experimentation. He looked back at her. She met his gaze without fear. She had already accepted her death. That acceptance gave her a freedom that Klaus had never possessed. She had nothing left to lose. He had everything to lose. But in that moment, he made a decision that would bind their fates together for the next 847 days. "You will not be used for experimentation," Klaus said quietly. "I am assigning you to the medical ward. You will assist me with patient care. Your medical training makes you too valuable to waste." Sarah stared at him. For the first time since arriving at Ravensbrück, something changed in her eyes. Not hope. She was too intelligent for hope. But perhaps curiosity. Why would a German officer save a Jewish prisoner? What did he want from her? Why? She asked. Klaus looked at her for a long moment. Then he said something that would eventually be used against him in court. "Because you are a physician, and physicians do not kill. They heal." That was the beginning. Over the following weeks, Klaus made Sarah's assignment official. He forged documents indicating that Dr. Gebhardt had personally approved her transfer to the General Medical Ward. He created a work file showing that Sarah possessed critical medical skills that were needed for camp operations. He lied repeatedly and systematically to protect one Jewish prisoner from the machinery of extermination that surrounded them both. Sarah worked in the medical ward. She treated prisoners who had diseases that would have killed them within days without intervention. She had almost no supplies, no antibiotics, no surgical equipment, no pain medication. She worked with bandages made from torn uniforms and antiseptic made from stolen alcohol. She saved lives with nothing but knowledge and determination. Klaus helped her. He stole medical supplies from SS stores. He diverted medications meant for German soldiers to Sarah's patients. He falsified records to hide what he was doing. Every theft was a capital offense. Every falsified document was treason. He did it anyway. They did not become friends. Friendship was impossible in Ravensbrück, but they developed something else. A partnership built on shared medical ethics. They would look at a patient, and Klaus would see a prisoner who was no longer productive. Sarah would see a human being who deserved treatment. Klaus began to see what Sarah saw. He began to understand that the uniform he wore did not change his obligation as a physician. First, do no harm. He had taken that oath. He would keep it even here, even now, even if it killed him. January 1943. The camp population increased. More transports arrived from Poland, from Hungary, from France. More women were worked to death in the camp factories. More women died of typhus and starvation and brutality. Klaus and Sarah worked 16-hour days trying to keep people alive. They failed more often than they succeeded, but they tried. That mattered to Sarah. Klaus was trying. He was not like the other SS officers who saw prisoners as disposable labor. He saw them as patients. He treated them with dignity. He saved those he could save. One night in late January, Sarah asked him a question. They were in the medical ward. It was after midnight. The last patient had been treated. They were alone. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You could be posted anywhere. You could be in a field hospital treating soldiers. You could be safe. Why are you here helping people your government wants dead?" Klaus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because if I do not help them, I become what they are. And I refuse to become that." Sarah looked at him carefully. Then she said something that would haunt both of them. Your refusal will not save you. When this war ends, no one will care that you tried to be decent. You wore the uniform. That will be enough. She was right. But Klaus could not accept that. Not yet. February through July 1943, the work continued. Klaus protected Sarah from reassignment. Sarah treated prisoners with whatever resources Klaus could steal. They saved perhaps 200 lives over those months. They could not save everyone. They could not stop the executions or the medical experiments or the death marches. But they could save some. They did save some. They chose to believe that mattered. They began to talk during the quiet hours after midnight. Not about the war. Not about what was happening around them. They talked about medicine, about the patients they had treated before the war, about the research they had wanted to do. Sarah told Klaus about the children's hospital, where she had worked in Vienna. Klaus told Sarah about the surgery rotation he had completed in Munich. They remembered what it felt like to be healers, instead of witnesses to mass death. Those conversations kept them both sane. August 1943. Something changed. Klaus realized he was no longer helping Sarah purely out of medical ethics. He had begun to care about her as a person. He looked forward to their conversations. He worried about her safety. He found himself taking greater risks to protect her. This was dangerous. Emotional attachment in a place like Ravensbrück was a form of suicide. But he could not stop it. Neither could she. One night, Sarah said, "You should stop helping me." Klaus looked at her, confused. "If you are caught, they will execute you," she continued. "I am not worth dying for." "Yes, you are," Klaus said simply. Sarah shook her head. "I am a dead woman. I have been dead since I arrived here. You are prolonging something that cannot be saved. When the war ends, I will either die here or die somewhere else. But I will die. You do not need to die with me." "The war will end," Klaus said. "Germany will lose. And when it does, you will survive. You will leave this place. You will practice medicine again. You will heal children the way you wanted to. I'm going to make sure you survive long enough for that to happen." "And what about you?" Sarah asked. Klaus did not answer. He had no answer. He knew what happened to Wehrmacht officers who served at concentration camps. He knew there would be trials. He knew there would be executions. But he also knew he could not stop helping Sarah. He had made his choice. He would live with the consequences. September 1943 through April 1945. 18 months, 547 days. Klaus continued to protect Sarah. He forged more documents. He stole more supplies. He intervened when SS guards tried to reassign her. He placed his body between her and the machinery of death. Sarah continued to treat patients. She saved lives when she could. She held hands with dying women when she could not. She survived because Klaus made her survival possible. They never touched. They never spoke of love. But what existed between them was deeper than romance. It was recognition. Klaus saw Sarah as the brilliant physician she had been before the Nazis destroyed her life. Sarah saw Klaus as the decent man he was trying to remain, despite the evil surrounding him. They witnessed each other's humanity in a place designed to eliminate all humanity. That witnessing was everything. April 28, 1945. Soviet artillery could be heard in the distance. The Red Army was coming. The SS began evacuating Ravensbrück. They force-marched prisoners north toward the Baltic. Most would die on the march. Klaus received orders to evacuate with the SS medical personnel. He had 6 hours before departure. He found Sarah in the medical ward. She was treating a patient with typhus. She looked exhausted. She had survived 847 days. Now, with liberation approaching, the SS was going to march her to death anyway. "You are not going on the march," Klaus said. Sarah looked at him. "I have no choice." "Yes, you do." Klaus pulled out documents he had prepared weeks earlier, a transfer order, sending Sarah to a sub-camp that no longer existed, a medical exemption claiming she was too ill to march, a work assignment that required her presence at Ravensbrück until Soviet arrival. All forgeries. All punishable by death. "Hide in the medical ward," Klaus said. "There is a storage room in the basement. No one goes there. Stay there until the Soviets arrive. They will be here within 48 hours. You will be liberated. You will survive. What about you?" Sarah asked. I will evacuate with the SS, Klaus said. I have no choice. If I stay, they will execute me as a deserter. If I go, perhaps I can reach American lines. Perhaps I can surrender to them instead of the Soviets. The Americans will put you on trial, Sarah said. I know, Klaus replied. They stood there, looking at each other. 847 days of partnership, 47 days of witnessing each other's humanity. 647 days that had bound them together in ways neither could explain. Thank you, Sarah said quietly, for everything, for keeping me alive, for treating me like a human being, for being who you are in a place designed to destroy who you are. Klaus wanted to say something. He wanted to tell her that she had saved him as much as he had saved her. That watching her maintain her humanity had shown him how to maintain his own, that he would carry her memory with him no matter what happened next. But he had no words adequate for what he felt, so he simply said, "Survive. That is all I ask. Survive and become the physician you were meant to be." Then he left. He joined the SS evacuation column. He marched north with them. He surrendered to American forces on May 7, 1945. He was taken into custody as a prisoner of war. He was held pending investigation of war crimes at Ravensbrück concentration camp. Sarah hid in the medical ward basement. She stayed there for 31 hours. On April 30, 1945, Soviet soldiers liberated Ravensbrück. Sarah emerged from hiding. She weighed 83 pounds. She was alive. She had survived 847 days in hell. Klaus Hartmann had made that survival possible. 6 months passed. Sarah recovered her health. She was interviewed by Soviet authorities, then by American authorities. She gave testimony about conditions at Ravensbrück. She described the medical experimentation. She described the executions. She described how she survived. She mentioned Klaus Hartmann. She explained that he had protected her. She explained that he had saved her life. The American investigators took notes. They filed her testimony. They added Klaus Hartmann to the list of defendants for the upcoming war crimes trials. October 1945, Sarah received a notice. She was being called as a witness in the Nuremberg Trials. The prosecutors wanted her testimony about medical crimes at Ravensbrück. They wanted her to describe what she had seen. They wanted her to identify the perpetrators. She agreed immediately. She would testify. She would tell the truth about what happened. She owed that to the women who died. She owed that to herself. Then she saw the list of defendants. Captain Klaus Hartmann, Wehrmacht Medical Corps, stationed at Ravensbrück concentration camp from December 1942 through April 1945. Charged with complicity in war crimes including medical experimentation, inadequate medical care, and failure to prevent prisoner deaths. Sarah stared at the document. Klaus was being charged with the same crimes as Dr. Gebhardt, the SS physician who had conducted torture experiments. Klaus was being treated as identical to the monsters who had murdered thousands. The Americans did not distinguish between those who participated in atrocities and those who tried to mitigate them. They saw only the uniform. They saw only the camp assignment. They saw guilt. Sarah requested a meeting with the prosecution team. She explained that Klaus Hartmann was different. She explained that he had saved her life and the lives of hundreds of other prisoners. She explained that he had risked execution to provide medical care. She explained that he deserved recognition as someone who had maintained humanity in impossible circumstances. The lead prosecutor listened carefully. Then he said, "Dr. Rosenfeld, I understand your gratitude, but Captain Hartmann served at Ravensbrück for 30 months. During that time, approximately 50,000 women died at that camp. He did nothing to stop those deaths. He did nothing to prevent the medical experiments. He wore the uniform of the regime that murdered 6 million Jews. His minor kindnesses to you do not absolve him of responsibility for the system he served. He saved my life," Sarah repeated, "and he participated in the machinery that murdered thousands of others," the prosecutor replied. "Will you testify to what you witnessed at Ravensbrück?" Sarah was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Yes, I will testify. November 20th, 1945, Nuremberg courtroom." Sarah walked to the witness stand. She wore a simple dress borrowed from an aid organization. She weighed 106 pounds, 23 pounds more than her liberation weight. Her hair had grown back. She looked almost like the person she had been before the war. Almost. She was sworn in. The prosecution began questioning her. They asked about conditions at Ravensbrück. She described the starvation, the disease, the executions. They asked about medical crimes. She described Dr. Gebhardt's experiments, the sulfanilamide infections, the bone transplants, the women who died screaming. The courtroom was silent. Even the defendants looked at the floor. Then the prosecutor asked about Captain Klaus Hartmann. Sarah looked across the courtroom. Klaus sat in the defendants section. He wore a plain grey suit. He had lost weight. His face was gaunt, but his eyes were the same. He looked at her without anger or pleading. He simply looked at her. He had accepted whatever came next. Did Captain Hartmann serve at Ravensbrück during your imprisonment? The prosecutor asked. Yes, Sarah said. Did he participate in medical decisions affecting prisoners? Yes. Did he have authority to prevent medical experiments on prisoners? Sarah hesitated. This was the critical question. Could Klaus have stopped the experiments? Technically, no. He was Wehrmacht, not SS. He had no command authority over SS physicians. But could he have reported the crimes? Could he have refused to participate? The answer was complicated. The honest answer was that refusal would have resulted in his own execution. But was fear of execution an acceptable excuse? Dr. Rosenfeld? The prosecutor prompted. Did Captain Hartmann have authority to prevent medical experiments? Sarah looked at Klaus. She thought about 847 days of survival. She thought about the hundreds of lives he had helped save. She thought about the man who had risked everything to maintain his humanity in hell. Then she thought about the 50,000 women who had died while he wore the uniform. She thought about the children who would never be healed because their mothers died at Ravensbrück. She thought about her own parents, dead because the system Klaus served had decided they had no right to exist. Captain Hartmann was a medical officer at Ravensbrück, Sarah said slowly. He had knowledge of medical experiments. He had access to prisoners used in those experiments. He did not stop the experiments. He did not report the crimes to higher authorities. He continued to serve in his position while thousands of women died. The courtroom was silent. Klaus showed no reaction. He simply continued looking at Sarah. Did Captain Hartmann provide you with special treatment? The prosecutor asked. Yes, Sarah said. Why? He claimed it was because of my medical training. He said I was too valuable to waste on experiments. Was that the real reason? Sarah was quiet. She could say yes. She could explain that Klaus had genuine medical ethics. She could testify that he had saved her because he was trying to maintain his humanity. She could tell the court that he was different from the monsters. She could try to save him the way he had saved her. But if she did that, what would it mean? Klaus had saved one Jewish physician, while 50,000 other women died. Was one life saved enough to excuse his participation in the system? Did his kindness to her matter when weighed against his complicity in mass murder? The prosecution was right. Klaus had done nothing to stop the camps. He had simply tried to be decent within an indecent system. Was that enough? Dr. Rosenfeld? The prosecutor asked again. Why did Captain Hartmann protect you? Sarah looked at Klaus one last time. She thought about everything they had shared. Then she made her choice. Captain Hartmann protected me because it made him feel better about serving at a death camp, Sarah said. Her voice was steady and clear. He saved my life, so he could tell himself he was still a good man despite wearing the uniform of murderers. He helped me so he could maintain the illusion that he was different from the other officers. But he was not different. He served the same system. He enabled the same crimes. He just felt guilty about it. The words hung in the courtroom air like smoke. Klaus's face did not change. He had known this was coming. From the moment Sarah was called as a witness, he had known what she would do. She would tell the truth. And the truth was that his small acts of decency did not absolve him of his larger complicity. The prosecutor continued questioning Sarah for another hour. She described the medical ward. She explained how Klaus had provided supplies. She detailed the prisoners he had helped. Every fact she testified to was accurate. Every statement was true, but the interpretation she provided condemned him absolutely. She portrayed Klaus as a man who had made small gestures of humanity to soothe his conscience while participating in genocide. She was not wrong, but she was not entirely right either. When Sarah stepped down from the witness stand, she walked past the defendant's section. She did not look at Klaus. She could not look at him. If she looked at him, she would see the man who had saved her life. She would remember 847 days of partnership. She would remember his steady hands treating dying patients. She would remember his quiet defiance of orders when defiance might have saved a life. She could not remember those things. She had to remember the uniform. She had to remember the system. She had to remember that good men who participated in evil were still participating in evil. The trial continued for weeks. Other witnesses testified. Klaus's defense attorney called character witnesses. Former prisoners testified that Klaus had helped them. Medical personnel testified that Klaus had frequently advocated for better prisoner care. The evidence showed that Klaus had been one of the more humane officers at Ravensbrück. But humanity within an inhumane system was not enough. December 16, 1945, verdict day. Klaus stood as the judge read the findings. Guilty on charges of complicity in war crimes. Guilty on charges of failing to prevent medical experiments. Guilty on charges of serving in a concentration camp while crimes against humanity were committed. The sentence was death by hanging. Klaus showed no reaction. He had expected this. He had known from the beginning how this would end. After the verdict, Klaus was returned to his cell. He was allowed to write letters. He wrote to his parents. He wrote to his sister. He wrote one final letter to Sarah. The letter was brief. Dr. Rosenfeld, it began, I do not write to ask forgiveness. I do not deserve forgiveness. You testified truthfully about what I did and what I failed to do. You were right that I helped you to make myself feel better. You are right that small kindnesses do not excuse larger crimes. You were right to condemn me. I want you to know that I do not regret protecting you. Keeping you alive was the one decent thing I did in an indecent place. I am glad you survived. I am glad you will heal children again. That matters more than my life. I hope you will remember that I tried to remain human. I failed in that attempt, but I tried. Perhaps that is the most any of us can do. Klaus Hartmann. The letter was delivered to Sarah at her temporary residence in Nuremberg. She read it once. Then she put it in a drawer. She did not read it again for 40 years. January 18, 1946. Klaus Hartmann was executed by hanging at Nuremberg prison. He was 33 years old. He went to his death quietly, with the same dignity he had tried to maintain at Ravensbrück. His last words were, I am sorry. It was unclear who he was apologizing to. Sarah did not attend the execution. She was already preparing to leave Germany. She immigrated to the United States in February 1946. She completed a medical residency in New York. She specialized in pediatrics again. She opened a practice in Brooklyn. She spent 40 years healing children. She never married. She never spoke about Ravensbrück unless asked. When she did speak about it, she described the horrors but never mentioned Klaus Hartmann by name. In 1986, Sarah was interviewed for a Holocaust remembrance project. She was 68 years old. The interviewer asked if anyone had helped her survive Ravensbrück. Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she said, yes, a German officer saved my life. I testified against him at Nuremberg. He was executed. The interviewer asked why she testified against someone who saved her. Sarah's answer was simple. Because the truth was more important than gratitude. That night, Sarah went home and found the letter Klaus had written 40 years earlier. She read it for the second time. Then she did something she had not done since 1945. She cried. Not for Klaus, he had made his choices, but for what they had both lost. For 847 days, when two people had witnessed each other's humanity, in a place designed to destroy all humanity. For a partnership that had kept them both alive, even though it could not save either of them from what came after. Sarah died in 1994 at the age of 76. She left behind a legacy of thousands of healed children and a reputation as a brilliant pediatrician. In her will, she donated her papers to the Holocaust Museum. Among those papers was Klaus's letter. The museum archived it without comment. The story of Klaus Hartmann and Sarah Rosenfeld raises questions that have no comfortable answers. Was Klaus a good man who served an evil system? Or was he complicit in that evil regardless of his personal decency? Did his efforts to save some lives matter when he failed to stop the larger machinery of death? Should Sarah have defended him, or was she right to testify that small acts of kindness do not absolve participation in genocide? There are no easy answers. Klaus chose to help individuals while serving a regime that murdered millions. That choice saved Sarah's life, but it did not save the thousands of other women who died at Ravensbrück. Sarah chose truth over gratitude. That choice sent Klaus to the gallows, but it affirmed that the uniform mattered more than personal kindness. Both Klaus and Sarah were trying to maintain their humanity in circumstances designed to destroy humanity. Klaus tried to be decent while wearing an indecent uniform. Sarah tried to heal while imprisoned in a place of death. They both succeeded and failed. Klaus saved Sarah, but could not save himself from the consequences of his service. Sarah survived, but could not save the man who made her survival possible. Their story reminds us that good intentions do not excuse evil actions. That serving an evil system makes you complicit in that evil, regardless of your personal morality. That wearing the uniform of genocide carries consequences that no amount of individual kindness can erase. Klaus Hartmann learned this lesson at the end of a rope. Sarah Rosenfeld carried that knowledge for 50 years, but their story also reminds us that even in the darkest places, humans make choices. Klaus could have been like the other officers. He chose differently. Sarah could have defended Klaus at his trial. She chose differently. Both choices mattered. Both choices had consequences. Both choices revealed something essential about the people who made them. In the end, Klaus Hartmann saved Dr. Sarah Rosenfeld's life for 847 days. She testified against him at Nuremberg. He was executed. She lived another 48 years. He made her survival possible. She made his death inevitable. Both statements are true. Neither truth cancels out the other. That is the unbearable complexity of their story. That is the unbearable complexity of every story from that time and place.